Good to see you again for episode 3 of All Gathered Up. And this week it was Gents Classics.
That's right. That's it.
And as always, as I say, we've got Carole here, master tailor and couturier, to give us her thoughts and analysis on the show. And as the point of this episode is to go into some of the techniques that came up on episode 3 of the Sewing Bee. So first of all, Carole, what techniques are we going to be focusing on in this show today?
Well, we have this complex situation a number of times where you have to match seams. Things have to come together, shapes have to meet at a point. That can really be quite complicated for some people and get nerve-wracking. So we're going to be talking about preparation, which is so important so that you avoid these potential disasters and that can be very frustrating. So a lot of it is going to be about how to set things up so that your seams match, everything comes to a point. And also I wanted to cover a little bit about that covered button because I think that stumped quite a few people. And I know how difficult that is, Stuart, when you're working with heavy tweed and you're trying to get that all around the little tiny teeth of that button.
Fabulous, right? Can't wait. Well, let's go straight into it then.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a lot in the videos about preparation and how to get the seams ready, how to press them properly. I'm going to introduce this tool.
Oh, what's that?
Flapper.
Oh, yes.
Remember we were talking about this the other day, Stuart. So this is just a piece of timber, and it's fashioned so it's easy to hang on to. And what this does is when you sew a seam, you press it open, then you put this on top, and it draws all the humidity, all the moisture out of the seam, and you get a really crisp, flat finish. So once you have one seam, pressed out nice and flat, you have another one, same treatment, and then you go to match them. And that's what that video has shown, that with preparation and understanding your seam allowances and knowing where to pin and how to line these things up, then you just sew your seam, open it out, and that line will be continuous.
This video shows how to match 2 straight seams in a simple junction. And in doing this, I want to introduce you to the wooden clapper, which is a tool with a smooth end. And when your seam is freshly pressed, you place it over, and this piece of wood draws all the humidity out of the fabric, leaving a nice crisp finish. So we have our second seam, and we're going to give it a press, and then use the clapper over the seam for a few seconds, and it will draw away all that moisture, and you'll end up with a flat, nice, crisp finish. So we're going to join both of these seams together now. We're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so we're going to join them with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And this intersection is going to be very important to match. So we're marking with a chalk, just a little line that will guide us in matching this up. We're going to use a straight pin, go into the chalk mark and come out right in the center of the seam, and reverse this on our second seam. Going in to the center of the seam and coming out at our chalk mark. Line everything up and move the pin back out of the fabric in the center of the seam and check your junction. And now we're ready to match these 2 seams with a 3rd seam. So now we're ready to join these 2 seams in our simple junction, and we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we're going to carry on sewing, feeding the fabric in where needed, and working slowly up and to the pin. And this is one instance when I would say do run over the pin, and here you can use, to refine your stitches, you can use the hand crank and get over the pin, remove it, and then continue on and finish your seam. Now you can check how it matches, and I'll tell you one more trick, and that is that if you give a gentle tug one way or the other, you can coax the junction into line.
I've got a little top that I made a while ago that shows just this kind of a juncture. So
I see. Yeah.
you can see it down there in the, those four things coming together. And I'll turn this around and then you can see again here.
Well, look at those points there, Carole. That's like perfect junction.
Yeah. So that shows, and this all happens just with the right preparation, Stuart. So your seams have to be prepared, they have to be flattened out, and then you just have to know that the machine runs in a certain direction. So you know the machine is going to be pulling the top layer over the bottom layer, right? And I'm sure you know about this in your quilting.
Yeah.
That sometimes you have to put the top layer slightly ahead of the bottom layer, depending on how thick it is and how, but there's a combination of understanding where you line the seam up over the other seam. And then there's also a technique of just, don't forget to keep feeding the fabric through, help it get into that feed dog so that the machine can do it, carry it through.
I have just realized that how important that is. And in the patchwork world, I use a tool for that. It's like a pointy thing. It's like I did used to use like an old knitting needle, but sometimes your finger can't get there to keep the fabric down. So I have a pointy thing. I don't know whether it's got a special name or not. Do you use anything like that?
I use all sorts of things just like that.
Oh, do you?
Sometimes I use a pin. Yes. Sometimes I use an awl.
A what?
Awl.
Ooh.
One of these.
Oh, well, look at that. And I have no idea. Can you spell that word? I don't know what the word is.
A-W-L.
An awl.
Awl. A-W-L. Yeah.
I've learned something today.
There you go. So, and you've seen it because I use that when I, as part of the covered button.
Yeah.
I actually picked this up at one point and used this. So,
that's exactly what I've got. But my
they use this a lot in pattern making to if you're moving a dart or swiveling things around, you can use this, and it just holds the paper onto the cutting surface, and you can move it around. But it's very handy. It's very sharp.
Yeah.
It can be very dangerous, but many uses.
Yeah, well, it looks just like mine. My handle is nowhere near as big as that, but I've realised how good it is. When I've got my 3 layers of fabric and I want to make sure that the fabric sits, and it helps to sort of push it through and tuck it, keep it flat.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with it, and it just evens everything out, doesn't it? Sometimes you see a ripple coming, and you think, oh no. But you can just encourage that, get the tension in that fabric all nice and flat again, just with a little help like that. And also the other thing, feeding in is important, but some people, they'll hold on to one end of the fabric and then they'll put their other hand behind and pull it through, or they'll hold it back. It's you've got to find that even tension, and you've got to work with the machine. The machine has to do the work, not you.
Let's go into the first round, which is the pattern challenge, which was the Baker Boy hat. Is that what they call it?
Baker Boy cap.
Cap. That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
And they are dealing with heavier fabrics, wools. Patrick said it was his. Was it his wool? Had he made it in his company? I didn't understand that bit.
Yeah, he has a made-to-measure wing of Norton's.
Right.
And I think he used that particular fabric, that twill, for one of the collection pieces, probably a jacket or waistcoat or something. So he knew about that fabric.
So already it's a challenge anyway, because they're using heavier fabric.
Yes, true enough. And they're using multiple layers. I think it looked to me like they fused. They applied a backing to the fabric and then cut the pieces. And then they sewed those together with the lining, with the band, So the seams were quite thick. And then adding the bill of the cap, the peak, so the multiple layers in a small space, very finicky. You're going to see an 8. It's not a hat. It's just a circle, but it's divided into 8, and you're going to see how all the pieces come together in a point, and how you can set that up. Because if you cut slightly outside the line and then sew slightly away from the seam allowance, that's when the precision starts to lose its grip.
We're going to join 8 pieces of fabric, and they're going to converge on one single point. So we've marked each section to show you exactly where that point is that all these sections are going to converge on. To do this, I find it helpful to sew a stay stitch. And I've done this just inside a 1/2 inch from raw edge to raw edge on both of the longer sides of this triangle. When they intersect, now you can see the point. One more thing about the stay stitch. You can see this is a salvage edge. It's the stable part of the fabric. The opposite edge is on the true bias, very unstable. So that line of stitching shows you where to stitch, but also it keeps things under control. So section by section, I'm going to join these 2 by 2. I'm going to start with this pair here. Take the pin, put the pin in right at the point, match it to the point of the section you're joining, and pin the edges together. And remember, sometimes you're going to have one stable side and one unstable side, so you kind of have to feed these edges in together. And you can do a quick test to see how this is going to line up. So I'm going to do these 4, and I'm going to sew together these 4, and then we're going to join the 2 sections together. So now we're ready to begin sewing. Now, because the point is so crucial here, I'm going to suggest that we start from the opposite side. It's already pinned. It doesn't matter that the pins are underneath. But this is going to make it easy for us to sew right into the point. So using our 1/2 inch, we're going to sew just on the inside of that yellow stay stitching line. You'll see our seam line is going to be in pink, so you can tell the difference. And it's just a thread's width away from that yellow stay stitch. And keep to our 1/2 inch seam allowance, feeding the fabric in where you need to. And then you can use the hand turn of the flywheel to get right exactly up to the point. And doing this way, you can adjust the length of your stitch. So when you're right in the point, now you can pivot around, retrace your stitches in the seam line, and this makes for a very neat back stitch. And now you can open up and you can test how accurate you were meeting the point. Keeping to those seam allowances. Now we've joined 2 halves of 4 sections each, and we've marked it with a pin right at the point. So I'm not going to bother pinning this. I'm just going to go ahead and sew it. I'm going to gauge it with my eye, and I'm going to feed in fabric where I need. As I come up to the point, remember you're sewing through quite a few layers of fabric, so you may have to just slow down. And when you come up to the point, again, you can sew very slowly, or you can use the flywheel, and you can turn this by hand, just to make sure that you join all the layers of fabric, and feeding in where necessary. Now we're over that point, and now we can finish our seam Once again, you're sewing just to the left of your stay stitch, maintaining the 1/2 inch seam allowance, nearly there. And close off a seam with a back stitch. And now you can trim up and open this complex junction and see how you've done. It's not a hat, but if it were, that's where you'd fix your covered button. There you are. 8 sections joined in a complex junction.
And let's go on then to the these covered buttons. I've never made one. I have no understanding of them. They all seem to be struggling with it. Was it hard? Was that right? Were they right to be struggling with it?
It's a challenge to cover a button with heavy tweed. It's very difficult because the top of the button has these tiny little teeth.
Oh, okay.
And you have to wrap the heavy tweed around this, the rim of the button, and then it's got to catch onto those teeth. If it doesn't, the fabric's just going to slip around, and you're not going to get it all in, and you're not going to get that top back on. And then if you don't gather the fabric in evenly, then you're going to get a fold in it.
Right.
And you saw that happen to Serena. And then she, all the will in the world won't get that cap to snap in, the underpiece to snap in. So, my heart sank when she put it in her mouth, and it worked, and it does work. But
you've got to be careful. So, right, let's go and see your tutorial then on how to do the covered button.
This is my method for making a covered button. Now, the covered button consists of 2 pieces: the top with some teeth around the inner rim, and the bottom, which snaps over the shank of the button. I made a paper pattern here, and the size of that pattern is about a 1/2 inch larger than the top button. I've put a piece of fusible there using a scrap, and that is just to strengthen the top of the button and keep the metal from shining through. The size of that fusible is about equal to the bottom of the button, the back of the button. I've also hand sewn a basting stitch all the way around the edge, and you can see when this is drawn in, this piece of fabric starts to assume the shape of the top of your button, and it's going to be a lot easier to maneuver. So just pop the top button in and draw up these threads as tight as you can without breaking the basting thread, and you can see how this is beginning to handle the bulk of the fabric. When everything is centered nicely, you can use your fingernail, or you can use, as I'm doing here, the point of a pin. I'm using a larger straight pin because it's a little bit sturdier. And what you're going to try to do here is stretch the fabric around gently and try to hook the fabric around the teeth that are in the inside of the button. And you just have to keep working at this. You might find that the straight pin works on light or medium weight fabrics, but with a heavier weight fabric like this, it may not be the tool of choice. So it's at this point where I turn to the trusty awl, which is a bit sturdier and has a longer sharp point on it that you can get in and finesse this fabric around the teeth. Now, see, I've hooked a few there, and I can feel now how the button top is becoming a lot sturdier, a lot more stable, and the fabric is now secure underneath those teeth. So just keep working at it. You'll get the hang of it. This takes practice, but you'll begin to feel what works best and what tool works best for you. So we're just about there. A few more bits of fabric around the teeth. Looks good. And now we can cut away that basting thread, and we can put on the back of the button. Now, this can be a little tricky. So again, with practice, sometimes it snaps right on. start with a finger pressure at first and see how far you get. If it doesn't work, you can use a set of pliers. And just start setting it up. Find a place where it does anchor, and then you might want to turn the button around and try to secure it from the other side. A few more attempts, and there we go. There we go. It's all secure now. And also you can see now how stable it is, and you can compare it to the first one, which is not lined. I don't know if you can see it in the film here, but I can. I can see the metal just gleaming through here and there. You don't want that on a finished garment. So lining it is always a safer bet.
Wonderful. Right now, we all know how to do covered buttons. And now we can all pretty much really reflect on Raf's covered button and just go, wow.
Yes, that was streets ahead, wasn't it? His cap, because not only did he match everything, and he made beautiful use of the cloth. So obviously he has a talent for seeing things in a bigger space. He looks at a pattern in it, and already his brain, he's manufacturing it. He's putting it together, and he can see that. So he's not afraid of patterns, and then had the genius to center that button at the crossroads of, and made that work. So just beautiful job done.
I mean, from my point of view as a patchworker, it just made my heart sing, because it was like what we call a 4-patch on that covered button, you know, and in that tiny, I mean, how big are we talking about? Is it an inch, those covered buttons?
That's it. I think so. I think that the button I showed in the tutorial is slightly larger, but you know, I chose a heavy tweed as well. No, he did a fabulous job on that, and maybe he took I don't know how he achieved that, but maybe he just had a seam, just made one seam that then joined 4 colors, and then so that, you know, there was a little bit of bulk to work.
I can say, so you've got that seam in that to clamp then that together.
Well, he knows what he's doing.
Anyone else in that pattern challenge that you saw and you went, that's good work? I
thought Adams was a success as well. It just didn't dazzle in the same way.
Yeah,
and I like
that lovely blue, wasn't it?
That lovely blue. Yeah, I like Catherine's choice of fabric, the green and then the gold cord. I thought that was great fun, and then the gold button on the top.
Oh yes.
And then it was disappointing about Medina with sewing a dove gray cap with black thread. That was.
Do you think that was a time issue there, not changing it, or did she just forget to change the thread?
Possibly. Did she line her cap in black?
Oh, right.
She had the black buttons, so maybe she threaded her machine and started with the lining, which was the trickier because it's slippery. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you have to, if you're working in contrast, you have to change your thread around.
And now, what about Serena? Because hers was the blue one. Was it the half and half?
It was, yeah. That's right.
And she still came second.
Yeah, I didn't mind that. It's odd. I think that would look a bit strange on, but and that's comes with not actually, you know, transposing your idea.
Yeah. And as you said earlier about Raf being able to visualize and see, you know, that's the difference, I suppose, between them as well. But she sewed it brilliantly, didn't she?
She did, sewed it beautifully. She had a bit of a traffic jam in the point. And so she said, I'm just going to take some stitches here and just, force it together, which you can do. A tweed is pretty forgiving.
Yeah. You
know, you could encourage it into a shape. So that was a good move on her part. And no, I thought that went really well. And poor Lepre, she's just, everything seemed to go wrong. Lots of holes in the band, not going on straight, not going on at all. And then...
and as we talked, that's time, isn't it? She's not and as with all these sewers, they're not bad sewers. It's the time pressure that causes the issues, isn't it? Because we would make that hat at home in a day or over a weekend.
Yes,
as soon as you put that time issue on, it's what makes sewers break, isn't it?
And it might have been just that comment. You know, you can see people in the workshop there, and you can see them just breathing and saying, everything's cool. It's going to take our time. Inside, they don't feel that way. They're doing that for the cameras, but inside, it's just everything is in turmoil. But when Esme said, well, this is a first for the sewing bee, it's a hat. So nobody had seen it. Nobody expected it. And
now tell me, wool. I've not sewn with wool at all. Was there anything that could have helped their sewing machines to cope with wool? Did they need to change needles? Did they need to change sewing feet? Is there anything that you could advise our viewers out there what to do with dealing with wool? Is there anything that we need to understand?
I think with wool, it's most of that is fairly spongy.
Right.
So you can get by with a regular normal sewing needle. The heavier denims you might want to, on a domestic, you might want to go to a 14 or a size 16 needle, just something heavier. You might loosen the tension just a bit, depending on the thickness. And if you're sewing something like a heavy duty corduroy on a domestic machine, you might switch to a walking foot. Yes,
you see, because that's what I was wondering if you was going to say that, because I'm a patch worker. I'm often using 2 or 3 layers, so I often keep my walking foot on all the time. I didn't know when they were obviously sewing that whether that would have helped them, or whether they would have been offered a walking foot and they just chose not to use it, or whether nothing was even suggested to them.
Yes, either way, I suppose. I'm sure they have all the accessories there. But I didn't see a fabric that was so heavy that you really need to change the equipment, you know. And they're going from, you know, the hat to the transformation, and then to the gents. Yeah, I think it's all pretty heavy duty stuff then. So maybe they were using a heavier needle. Who knows? But certainly those are the things you can do.
So we had, at the end of that round, we had Raf and Serena and Adam, who are now looking as though they're our top nearly each week, aren't they? First, second, and third. A big group in the middle, really, and then Damien in the last position there.
Yeah.
So there's other than those 3, everyone else, I think, still seems, would you not say, a kind of a bunch?
I think there's going to be some surprises. I think certainly Fari's confidence is going to soar, you know, with her garment of the week.
Yes.
And first time she ever finished anything. So maybe that will help her. Andrew, I think, is a little bit overlooked. I don't think his talents are acknowledged in the way that they might be, because he does some beautiful work. And I loved his skirt out of sleeves, 4 sleeves, with using the cuffs, taking the buttons out and using the holes, the button holes, as a lacing, a path to lace. I thought that was ingenious. It was one of my favorites in the Transformation Challenge.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, because it was so simple in a way, wasn't it? When you looked at it from a distance,
it was so pretty. You know, it was pink and gray, and he found the cord, and it's a gentle garment, and I loved that kind of the handkerchief hemline.
And while we're talking about the Transformation Challenge, from my chats with some of the customers in the shop over the last couple of days, there seemed to be like a Marmite, a love and hate about Serena's winning one. Some people loved it, and some people were like, "Oh, I don't understand why that one." What did you think about it?
I thought it was a really interesting piece, wearable, but I thought it was random, and I wondered how it got together. I wondered if it was planned. I wondered if it was just, I'll put this here and I'll put that there, and the collar would work here, and I need to join the front to the back somehow. Oh, I know, I'll just make a pocket,
Yeah, that's right.
We'll put some jelly beans in it, and that'll sort that out.
Well,
It was cute in the end, and
yeah.
like I said, wearable.
And I think when I was trying to have this conversation with the customers, it was about, they always say at the beginning of the transformation challenge, it's to show off the sewer's creative flair. And I think that's what that came across really ultimately, wasn't it? There was a bit of creative flair there, wasn't there?
And there was. And simple top, easy to control. She didn't make a big dress and have other complications. Easy to control. It was neatly done. And it hung together really well. And I think the judges loved it.
Well, yeah, she came first, and we then had, it was like a swapsies for first, second, and third. We have Serena, Adam, and Raf that time, first, second, third. So our trio, who are, when I sometimes think about it, like the Grand Prix, they are at the top there, aren't they? Or they're starting to in a horse race to pull out, aren't they? Those three.
That's right. That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't see that.
It's going to be interesting to see their journey, I think, over the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yes, it all has to do with what they're set up to do now.
Yeah.
And we've got a very bright, colorful challenge coming up. So that's going to require creative skills. So that'll be interesting.
We must, and I know we say this a lot, but we that's one thing we always respect of the sewers. They're putting themselves into this really unusual position of time and pressure. And yes, I know we criticize what they make and what was good and what perhaps wasn't, like they do in football, after the football show when the pundits talk about, oh, how was he performing, or, man of the match and so forth. But, they are really putting themselves up for it in unusual conditions, really, aren't they?
Yeah, they're just asking to be critiqued.
Yeah. So they're doing wonderfully, really, aren't they, to do all that under those difficult conditions.
Every one of them. Hats off to them.
Yeah. Right. Let's go on to the made to measure, the utility jacket.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now here, I think you need to choose the right pattern. You need to make this job as simple as possible. So the brief was, you need to have a minimum of 3 pockets.
Yeah.
And so stick to that. A simple collar, a one-piece collar maybe, a central front zip, no hidden plackets, no epaulets, no bellows pockets, no belts, things like that will help you. Yeah. I really liked Rebecca's pattern because it ticked all those boxes.
Yeah, and I think I said to you, I noticed the raglan, and I've just made a raglan t-shirt in the last episode. So, and I could see how easy that was. Do you think that was her perhaps being very savvy with her choice, knowing that a raglan is easier to do than a set-in sleeve?
Yes, I think so. It's a good strategy for Rebecca. Everyone else had a set-in sleeve, and she went with a raglan, and it was easier. And I think Patrick did comment. I think he said something like, "Well, you won't have the pressure of fit with the choice of sleeve."
So we're going to then look at pockets.
So pockets is the first thing you have to do. You've got to get the pockets on the forepart or on the sleeve, and you've got to sort all that out before you can move any further with the garment. So that's that, and they're finicky. They're some of them had pleats, some of them had bellows. Andrew had bellows in a contrast.
I don't know what a bellow is. Sorry, can you?
A bellows is a strip of fabric that goes around the pocket, around the outer edge of the pocket, and then it sits inside. The pocket sits flat.
Yes. So when you put stuff in it, it bellows out.
That's right. It bellows out.
Is that why it's called a bellow?
Could be.
Right. Well, let's go into the video then, where you explain to us all about the pockets.
Here I've prepared a patch pocket with rounded corners. I've sewn a guide stay stitch around all edges. I've prepared a 1-inch facing with a 1/4 inch underturn, and I've sewn the corners right sides together and graded the seam allowances. to get a nice crisp finish, I did use the wooden clapper after this was all pressed. Now once again, I want to mention again this stay stitch, which I've put in just shy of a ½ inch, and also added a second row of long basting machine stitches that we're going to use to further refine when we press these corners around. So we're going to start with pressing these edges in, and using the stay stitch, roll the fabric back and forth so you just past it about a 1/16 of an inch, and press around, drawing the edges of the fabric in as you press around, using your steam, coaxing it carefully until you complete the edge. Then once again, you can use these larger basting stitches, pull the thread through, and you can see how that's going to draw in some of that excess fabric, and it's going to smooth this out. It's going to take the lumps away, and now you can give it a final press and use your clapper to draw out that excess moisture and give yourself a nice flat finish. And now you can give the patch pocket a top press and see how nice and smooth that edge is. Now I want to show you two different finishes and how to attach this pocket to your garment. That is after you've enclosed your facing with a top stitch. I've got here at the top corner a triangular reinforcement. You can make up your own however you want to do that to make it sturdy. And I've pinned half of the pocket to this piece of fabric. Now I want to say a thing about pinning. Try not to put your pin in at too great an angle, because you'll bunch up the layers of fabric, and you can see there how it distorts that smooth line on the edge of the pocket. So use a much slighter angle and just gently put your pin in and come back out again so that you're not disrupting that outer edge. And this will help you get an even nice, smoother finish. So now we're ready. We're ready to sew this on. We're going to top stitch. This is the first of two finishes, including the top corner reinforcement. So we're going to line up the patch pocket with our garment fabric, working about 1/8 of an inch. And we're going to start to sew the reinforcement. We're going to go down a few stitches just till we meet the edge of our facing, and we're going to pivot around, and we're going to stitch the longer edge of the triangle, feeding the fabric in, and come to the end 1/8 of an inch away, and pivot again, and now we're going to sew a few stitches across the top of the pocket. Use your flywheel by hand to refine the spacing. And now we're going to continue down, retracing the first stitches we made, feeding in the fabric, and using that 1/8 just along the edge, taking our pins out as we go. We're going to use our left hand to guide the fabric around the corner, and again feeding in excess fullness, particularly around the curve, using the left hand to steer around the corner, maintaining that 1/8 of an inch accurately along the edge of the pocket. And now we're just about finished here with the first of two samples of how to attach our patch pocket. You can do a bit of smoothing out with your hand, stretching your seam away. There's our first. For our second of two finishes, on the rounded edge of our patch pocket, we've moved over to a domestic machine, a zigzag machine. Now after you've done a sample of your length and width, make sure that the needle is positioned to the right of the stitch, and align the needle to the outside edge of the pocket. So we're going to now follow the edge of the pocket where the right side of the needle of the zigzag just meets the end of the outer edge of the pocket, and follow this around, encasing the edge of the pocket in this zigzag. And don't go beyond the edge of the pocket, just make sure the needle stays right at that far edge. Feeding in the fullness along the way. And sewing right to the edge of the pocket. You can use the head of your pin, the point of the pin rather, you can use that to ease in any fullness. Now, when we get to the end, you can sew whatever reinforcement you want here. I'm going to do a simple back stitch. And now you can see your two finishes, and you can compare them. The first, here we have our zigzag or loose satin stitch, and you can compare that to the straight stitch, top stitch, and see the difference. So you have your choice.
So that leads us nicely then into the debate that Esme had with Serena, I think it was, with that flamboyant fabric, and whether the pocket should have been disguised and you know, within, or whether it should have been purposely cut from a different part of the fabric so it looked standoutish. What do you think about that whole discussion?
Well, on this occasion, I would agree with Esme, because the pattern was so random and so graphic that matching it, you lost the pocket.
Okay, yeah.
And I think it would have been a bit more interesting to see the pattern interrupted, cut, yeah, other colors attached to it. You know, I think it would have become livelier. When I looked at that, at all that effort she went to, you know, to match it, and it didn't improve the look of the garment.
Indeed, I think because the fabric was so busy. I mean, it was a lovely fabric, and I thought, good on her not to assume that because we're doing a men's utility jacket, we've all got to have grey and blue.
Yes, yeah. It was a lovely choice of fabric. Yeah. It was great fun.
But because it was so busy, I think you're right. Had the pocket been a different part of the fabric, it would have almost made a junction for the eye to rest. So it would have given a chance for the eye to rest on the fabric and not be so busy. It would have broken it up, wouldn't it?
It would. And finished the way it was flat. It was an interesting pattern. It looked jolly, but it was flat. It didn't have texture, didn't have a dimension to it. I think just cutting the pockets randomly would have made the world of difference. And
because now we're all pocket experts, what about Andrew and his 8 pockets?
I loved his spirit of doing the contrast bellows there, you know, mixing the blue and the orange, two very stroby colors together. And again, I say, I think some of his work is overlooked.
Yeah.
I think he's got some talent, and I think we're going to see some surprises. I hope we do, because so many things. I love the paper bag shorts. You know, I was upset when he didn't rank higher, because I think he's very, you know, good with his choice of fabrics. He's a neat technician, and I hope that he. I hope we see some nice surprises from Andrew.
And I think that's a lovely way of putting it, a neat technician, because he dealt with that issue of the, oh, hello, cat. Hello, Damsel. He dealt with the button band, as I would call it from my knitting days. He dealt with that incredibly well, didn't he?
A very fast and good-looking fix to take that contrast orange. He knew the jacket was going to be too small, and he just increased the girth of it with that move, and got his collar right, and then I think rounded off the bottom. No, good on him. A very good fix.
Yeah. And so, speaking about a mistake from that point of view, we had Adina with the mistake with the zip, and it kind of worked out in the end, didn't it?
Yes, I mean it did. she obviously she sewed the zip on the wrong side of that placket, and then there was no turning back. I mean, fixing that would have taken hours to unpick and get it right. It would have been soul destroying to have to do that. So again, a good move.
And we obviously felt for Loratu with all those different features and the issues with the buttons again. You kind of think perhaps, did that mean she didn't practice? So because if she had a practice, would she have come across that issue earlier?
You would have thought, wouldn't you? I think she seemed to have trouble from the word go with that popper.
Yeah.
She said, here's all the bits, and she tried to get the first. To be honest, I don't know there's several kinds of those, and I don't use them. But when I do, there's a machine for that. There's a special machine. This is a Victorian thing that weighs a ton that you install these things with, and to put them in with a little hammer like that, I think that was a very tall order.
Yeah.
You may be right. She never saw them before. She didn't practice with them. And that would have made all the difference.
Well, and I think we know who practiced, don't we? Really.
No. Who finished her piece?
Barry really must have. She must have come out of last week and gone, right, I'm not going to be in that position again. I'm going to practice, because she just seemed so calm and confident through all the editing, through all that, didn't she? That last round.
Great composure. And I think she came out of week 2 and she sat herself down and she got a strategy. And she thought, this is what's going to happen, and this is how I'm going to make it happen. And her jacket was just purity and function, right?
Yeah.
A nice color, easy on the eyes. She chose contrast, but didn't exploit it.
Yeah.
She made some piping cord and just piped the shoulder seam, hid the rest of that beautiful print underneath the pocket flaps. It was an unboastful idea from the start. And I loved I really liked how they filmed it, because
Oh, right, go on.
the camera started at the waist.
Oh, did it?
And then it just went up, and you saw a straight line of pocket, a straight line of flap, another straight line, and you thought, oh, that's just.
So the editor almost knew they liked it as well in the edit through.
Yes,
yeah.
They probably did that after the fact, didn't they? After one, and they read it. It was a gem.
There is something to be said about that, and I think this is in any type of creative craft. When I was teaching in drama and theatre, when doing a set design, we often hear that sometimes the simple ones are the most effective, and I think Farry's version there was case in point for that, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, deceptively simple to pull that off, because everything had to be straight.
Yeah.
And she had to make sure that in this sea of teal blue, that I got this treat of detail. And she worked that out, the size of the pocket, the size of the flaps, they were slightly bigger. There's nothing mean about it. And it just sat at the hip, didn't it? It wasn't a long jacket. There was no, it's just purity about it. She picked it well. Right.
And I think that's where we mustn't underestimate that, choosing something that looks simple isn't necessarily easy either. You've still got to do it and do all those techniques and execute that. And I think perhaps sometimes that's where the sewers in all seasons perhaps go wrong, don't they? They think, right, I need to impress. So I need to have lots of techniques and I need to do like all bells and whistles, but actually you don't to make a good garment, do you?
No, you just need enough. Just enough will do. And the eye doesn't, we don't want to have too much work to do to appreciate it. It's there for us. And
of course she then got Garment of the Week. And I think we all knew, I think the whole of the UK was like, for it, yes, that's going to be Garment of the Week.
She finished ahead of time, and there was a dance, there was a song in her voice. Did you get that? She was so thrilled.
But we all knew though as well. We were like, yes, it was so good. It was so good. Oh, wonderful. Well, so there we are. So man's utility jacket and a baker's boy hat. We've had loads of techniques covered there. And show us the clapper again.
Oh, here it is. Nice one. I had that specially made. I like this one because it fits in the hand. But you can also use it if you have a seam that you want to press out, so it's a shorter seam. You can use this as an ironing board, so you can just open the seam up and press. This would have been a good tool to use to press the seams of the beggar boy hat. I didn't see too many people pressing theirs, and I didn't see the pressing in the finished product. So.
Speaking about seams, I know we were just about to wrap up, but from a patchwork point of view, we are kind of taught to press the seam to one side, or what we call the dark side, because you don't want your fabric showing through. Is there a general rule with dressmaking to press your fabric a certain way, or is it open, or is it just according to the pattern you're following in the garment?
Yes, I think it just depends. It depends on the seam finish.
Okay.
So if you're overlocking your seams, or you're pinking overcasting them or pinking them, press them flat. If you're doing a flat felled seam, then all layers go to one side.
Oh, I see.
Darts are pressed usually to one side, to either the center front or the center back. Horizontal darts are pressed down. It varies according to the look. And if you're going to top stitch something, you want everything to go in one direction and then secure it all with a top stitch. So it does depend, but there's so many seam finishes.
How much have I learned today already? And I hope you viewers out there have learned something from this too, and can take something from this content. If you have, brilliant. Show us your appreciation with a like on the video. If you want more information, head over to Carole's channel, which you can type into Google, I Never Learned to Sew, and you'll see the detailed tutorial there. Carole does a bit of talking as well before those ones, so you get a bit more, and comment and let us know what you think. And if you've got a question, Carole, you're about to answer, aren't you?
We're absolutely very happy to. Just want to help people feel better and get better with their techniques. That's the aim.
Brilliant. Well, we're absolutely loving it. So there we are. We look forward to next week, which I missed. I don't know what was the trailer. Did it say what it was next week? Oh,
I think we're going to do. I saw what looked like a Breton top, so it might.
Oh, it's International Week. That's it. Yes.
And then I think we're going to. It looked like we're going to do something in homage to Frida Kahlo.
Ah, that's it. Yes. So it's a Breton. It is. It's right. I love a Breton. It's one of my favourite tops. So that means we might be looking at stripes.
Stripes and matching stripes, and maybe chevrons, and who knows?
Yes. Oh, I can't wait. That might be my next one. Though I've dug some tweed out of the shop, Harris tweed. So I might try and make a baker's boy hat.
I'll be looking forward to that next week.
Thank you,
I want to see you model that.
Thanks, Carole, and we'll say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Stuart.